Have you ever felt that someone was not telling you the truth? Maybe it was a friend, maybe a coworker, or someone you just met. You could not explain it, but you felt something was wrong. Something felt off. This feeling is very common. We all experience it at some point. But here is the real question. Why do people lie? And why do we believe them, even when we feel doubt? Lying is a part of human behavior. It is not always simple, and it is not always bad. Some lies come from fear, some come from shame, and some come from protection. In this episode, we will explore the psychology of lying. We will understand why it happens, and we will learn how to notice the signs. But most importantly, we will do it through simple English listening practice. So just relax and listen carefully. Let's start with a simple idea. People do not lie for only one reason. There is no single answer. Human behavior is more complex than that. When we think about lying, we often think about something negative. We think about dishonesty. We think about betrayal. But in real life, it is not always so simple. There are many different reasons why people lie. One of the most common reasons is fear. People are afraid of being judged. They are afraid of getting in trouble. They are afraid of losing respect from others. So they choose to hide the truth. Another common reason is shame. Sometimes people feel embarrassed about what happened. They do not want others to see their mistakes. So they protect themselves by changing the truth. There is also the reason of protection. People sometimes lie to protect other people's feelings. For example, someone may say they like something, even if they do not, just to avoid hurting someone. These are often called small lies. And then there is habit. Some people lie without even thinking. It becomes automatic, like when someone says, "I'm fine," even when they are not fine at all. It is not always intentional. It is just a habit of social life. We also lie to make life easier in the moment. The truth can feel uncomfortable. It can lead to arguments. It can create stress. So the mind chooses the easier path. A quick solution. A small lie. But here is something important to understand. Not all lies come from bad intentions. Some lies come from emotional pressure. Some come from fear. Some come from kindness. And some come from confusion. That is why we should not rush to judge people. Human behavior is not black and white. It exists in different shades. When we understand this, we start to see people differently. We become more patient, we become more aware, and we stop assuming everything is simple. In the next part, we will go deeper into the psychology behind lying. We will look at what is happening inside the human mind and why the brain sometimes chooses lies instead of truth. So stay with me. Now, let's go deeper into the psychology of lying. Why do people actually lie, even when they know it can create problems? Later, the answer is not simple, but it often starts with one basic human need: emotional safety. Most people lie not because they are trying to be harmful, but because they are trying to protect themselves. The human brain is designed to avoid pain and seek comfort. So when a situation feels stressful, embarrassing, or dangerous, the mind quickly looks for the easiest escape. And sometimes that escape is a lie. Think about a moment when someone asks you a difficult question. Maybe you made a mistake at work. Maybe you forgot something important. In that moment, your brain reacts faster than your logic. Instead of thinking deeply, it tries to reduce tension immediately. So you say something that protects your image, even if it is not completely true. This is called emotional decision-making. It means people do not always choose based on logic. They choose based on how they feel in that exact moment. Fear is one of the strongest emotions behind lying. Fear of punishment. Fear of judgment, fear of losing respect from others. Another important factor is self-image. Most people want to be seen as responsible, intelligent, or successful. When reality does not match that image, lying can become a way to fill the gap. It is like protecting a version of yourself that you want others to believe in. There is also social pressure. In many situations, telling the truth can create conflict. So the brain chooses what feels socially safer. For example, in a group setting, someone might agree with an opinion they do not truly believe in just to avoid standing out. Over time, small lies can also become habits. When someone lies once and it works, the brain remembers it as a successful strategy. So the next time a similar situation appears, the brain repeats the same behavior automatically. This is how lying can slowly become a default reaction, not a conscious choice. But it is important to understand this. Lying is not always a sign of bad character. It is often a sign of internal conflict, a conflict between truth and emotional comfort, between honesty and self-protection. When we understand this psychology, we begin to see people differently. Instead of simply labeling someone as a liar, we start asking a better question. What were they trying to protect in that moment? Because in many cases, lying is less about deceiving others and more about protecting oneself from discomfort. And that is what makes human behavior so complex. Now let's move to a very interesting question. How can we actually spot a lie? First, it is important to understand something very clearly. There is no perfect method. There is no single signal that proves someone is lying. Human behavior is too complex for that. What we are looking for are patterns, not absolute proof. One of the most common signs people talk about is inconsistency in a story. When someone is telling the truth, their memory usually stays stable. But when someone is creating a story, small details can change over time. Maybe the location changes slightly. Maybe the sequence of events is not the same. These small differences can sometimes indicate that the story is being constructed rather than remembered. Another possible sign is over-explaining. When people lie, they often feel nervous. To reduce suspicion, they may add too many unnecessary details. They think that more information will make the story more believable. But in reality, too many details can sometimes have the opposite effect. It can feel unnatural, like the person is trying too hard. Timing is also something people observe. For example, if someone answers a question instantly, without any pause, it might feel rehearsed. On the other hand, if there is a long silence before answering, it might suggest the person is thinking carefully about what to say. However, both fast and slow responses can happen for many innocent reasons, so timing alone is not enough. Body language is another area people often pay attention to. When someone is nervous, they might avoid eye contact, fidget, or touch their face. Some people become very still and controlled when they are lying because they are trying hard to hide their nervousness. But again, these behaviors are not proof. Some honest people are simply shy or anxious by nature. Facial expressions can also give small clues. Sometimes emotions do not match the words being spoken. For example, someone might say they are happy, but their expression looks tense or flat. This mismatch can sometimes raise questions, but it is important to be careful because people express emotions differently across cultures and personalities. Another interesting point is emotional leakage. This happens when a person tries to control their story, but small emotions still appear naturally. For example, a slight change in tone, a quick facial reaction, or a moment of discomfort when a certain topic is mentioned. These small signals can sometimes reveal stress. However, the most important idea is this: you should always look at clusters of behavior, not one single sign. One action means nothing on its own, but a combination of multiple signals might suggest something is wrong. For example, if someone avoids eye contact, changes their story, and becomes unusually defensive at the same time, you might start to notice a pattern. Even then, it is not proof. It is only a signal that more attention is needed. We also need to talk about something very important: bias. Sometimes we think someone is lying simply because we already doubt them. Our mind tries to confirm what we believe. This is called confirmation bias. It can easily lead to wrong judgments. That is why good observers do not rush. They listen carefully. They stay neutral. They ask questions instead of making conclusions too quickly. In the end, spotting a lie is less about catching someone and more about understanding human behavior. It requires patience, awareness, and emotional control. Because the truth is, even experts can be wrong. Now, let's talk about something very important. Even though we often focus on how to spot lies, we need to remember a deeper truth. Not every lie comes from a bad place. In fact, many lies in daily life are what people call white lies. These are small lies that are told to avoid hurting someone's feelings or to keep a situation peaceful. For example, if a friend asks you, "Do I look okay?" and you say, "Yes," even if you are not completely honest, you are trying to be kind, not harmful. This shows that human communication is not always black and white. It is not simply truth versus lies. It is often about intention. Why did the person say what they said? What were they trying to protect? Were they trying to avoid conflict? Or were they trying to cause harm? When we understand intention, we become more mature in how we judge others. Instead of reacting emotionally, we start thinking more carefully. We realize that sometimes people lie because they are afraid, insecure, or trying to protect relationships. This does not mean lying is always acceptable, but it means we should not rush to label someone as a bad person just because they were not fully honest in one moment. Life is complex, and human behavior is even more complex. The same action can have different meanings depending on the situation. So, the important truth is this: always look beyond the lie. Look at the reason behind it. So, what should you do if you think someone is lying? The most important thing is to stay calm. Do not react too quickly. When people feel attacked, they often become more defensive, and the situation can get worse. Your goal is not to win an argument. Your goal is to understand what is really happening. Instead of accusing, try asking simple and open questions. Give the other person space to explain. Sometimes, when people feel safe, they naturally move closer to the truth. Pressure often creates more lies, but patience often creates honesty. You should also listen carefully, not just to the words, but to the meaning behind them. Pay attention to how the story is told, but do not jump to conclusions too fast. Remember, one moment is never enough to judge a person. If something feels unclear, you can revisit the topic later in a calm way. Timing matters. A peaceful conversation is often more effective than a heated confrontation. In the end, the best response is emotional control. Stay respectful, stay patient, and focus on understanding rather than blaming. We have now reached the end of today's episode. Today, we explored a very human topic: why people lie and how we might understand it better. We learned that lying is not always simple. It can come from fear, from protection, from social pressure, or even from kindness in the form of white lies. We also looked at how to observe behavior more carefully. But more importantly, we learned that there is no perfect way to detect a lie. Human behavior is complex, and it should always be understood with patience and awareness. We talked about intention and how it changes the meaning of what people say. And we also learned that the best way to respond is not with anger or accusation, but with calmness, curiosity, and emotional control. If there is one idea to remember from this episode, it is this: try to understand before you judge. Thank you for listening to Slow English Zone. I hope this episode helped you improve your English listening and also gave you something to think about. Keep practicing, keep listening, and I will see you in the next episode.